Okay, so let's have a look at the content first of all for the Germany section. And here it is, 3 parts. Okay, let's remind ourselves of the year first of all, 1890 to 1945. The 3 parts are Part 1, Germany and the growth of democracy, Part 2, Germany and the Depression, and Part 3, the experiences of Germans under the Nazis. So maybe you want to pause it at this stage and just go through all of the different parts and think about your competence in each area, and is there anything that you need to go over? So that's a chance to pause it. The thing to remember is that the focus of this course is really on the German people, the influence or the effect of the German government on their people, and the different types of government over the 55 years. So we're thinking about, to start with, what is effectively a monarchy under Kaiser Wilhelm II, and that's Germany and the growth of democracy. There's the growth of political parties like the Social Democratic Party. In Part 2, we have the Depression as a result of what happens in the USA. And after that, of course, after Germany has transitioned to a democracy, which, as we can see, is Part 3 of this first section, Germany and the growth of democracy. And finally, Part 3 is the experiences of Germans under the Nazis. So in all of these cases, it's just remembering that what you're going to be asked about probably are questions to do with how the people were affected by things that were going on. The focus is really on the German people and how their government's actions were affecting their lives. So just keep that in mind when you're revising it. There are 6 questions over this first part of the paper, and that's the guidance for each one. So you can pause it at this stage, but we'll look at each one in detail as we go through the questions. The first 3 are about 2 interpretations which will be given. So number 1 is, how does interpretation A differ from interpretation B? Number 2, why do they differ? A very different question. And 3, which is more convincing? And then you get a very basic question, just a 4-mark, describe 2 problems. And question 5, in what ways? We'll come to that. And then finally 6 is the most heavily weighted in the Germany section, 12 marks. So we know we spent 15 minutes on that. Which was more important? Which was the more important reason why, X or Y? And we'll look at some examples of what that looks like. Remember, for each of these, there are practice questions, so you can pause the video and have a go applying the advice and writing the practice questions, answers to the practice questions, of course in time conditions. Let's look at the first question now, which is, how do interpretations A and B differ on the reasons for the Night of the Long Knives? So we're looking for just one Peel paragraph here. Would be fine. It's 4 marks. So we're not going to spend more than 5 minutes on it. But the focus is on how they are different and not why they're different. Not to do with the historians or the writers' motives. We're not interested in motives. We're not interested in why they're saying what they're saying. What we're interested in is just the context of what they're saying. What, in this case, with this question, are they saying? Is each one saying about the Night of the Long Knives? Specifically, what is each one saying about the reasons for the Night of the Long Knives? Okay, you could just annotate if you wanted to. You know, this is the reason he's given, or maybe there's a couple of reasons given. So take a moment to read those and just think about what reasons are being given for the Night of the Long Knives. Just remember, focus so carefully on the question. Keep rereading the question to make sure you are answering the question using Peel. Once again, use the question vocabulary to start a focus point. A and B differ on the reasons for the long knife, for the Night of the Long Knives, in that you could just quickly give what A says and what B says are the main reasons, and go and give your evidence using specific aspects out of the interpretations, explain them. Okay, so in other words, focus on the content, what the source is saying, not the context that is your background knowledge or the provenance, the author's background. Just focus on what is being said for this first question. How do they differ? Question 2 is also just 4 marks, so just 5 minutes, maybe 2 peel paragraphs, 2 pretty short peel paragraphs. Couldn't write that much in 5 minutes, but this is why might the authors differ. So different question, focus on why they're different and not how. Be very, very clear on the difference between question 1 and 2. How are they different, question 1? Why are they different, question 2? In other words, focus on the context, that is your background knowledge, and not the content, not specifically what's being said, but what could be the reasons for why. First of all, Rauschning in interpretation A says what he does about the Knight of the Long Knives in Hitler. What could be the reasons for Professor William Dodd's view of the Knight of the Long Knives and the reasons for it? This is really a question often about psychology and motives. So give a developed or ideally complex explanation about what their motives could be. This is where you have to use a bit of psychology as well to think about why might they be saying what they're saying. What could be their motives? And it's just about understanding human nature, these kinds of questions. Why might they be different? So think carefully. Paragraph 1, focus on interpretation 1, reasons for this view. Paragraph 2, focus on interpretation 2 and reasons for this view. So very simple structure. Once again, using Peel, using question terminology to sculpt, to craft your opening point sentence. For example, interpretation A, give the reason, thinks that, or maybe feeling that, and give a reason why they would be saying what they're saying. Usually there's going to be a bit more than just this. Why might the authors differ? Why might the authors differ on the reasons for the Knight of the Long Knives? You're going to get a bit more detail in the question than just why might the authors differ. Here's question 3. Now, of the 3 interpretation questions, question 3 you'll notice is 8 marks. So the first 2, how are they different? Question 1 is just 4 marks, 5 minutes. Number 2, why are they different? Again, just 4 marks, 5 minutes. But question 3 is 8 marks, so you're going to spend 10 minutes on it. It's the more detailed of the 3 interpretation questions to finish with. So 2 peel paragraphs perhaps, or even 3, and we'll look at that in a minute. Use the content of the interpretations and the context. So I think we just remind ourselves once again, keep reminding yourself, what is the question? Which interpretation do you find more convincing on the reasons for the Knight of the Long Knives? Okay, so this is about your view. Which do you think, which convinces you? Which do you think gives the more valid reasons, in this case, for the Knight of the Long Knives? There's no credit for mentioning provenance, who produced it, and their motives. So you can't say, it's not fair to say, well, interpretation B by Professor William Dodd is more convincing to me because interpretation A is written by a disillusioned Nazi. That's not fair, because that's just discounting everything he's saying based on his background. You have to look at what is being said in both cases in detail to decide which one you find more convincing based on what you know about the Knight of the Long Knives. This is where you want to bring in your own detailed background knowledge as a result of effective revision to really say which is more convincing. First peel paragraph, analyze the first interpretation, its strengths and its weaknesses, just briefly. Second peel paragraph, same, but this time with the second interpretation, strengths and weaknesses. And then third peel paragraph, analyze what you think is the more convincing interpretation and say why. So that's where you're just going to sum up after looking at the strengths and weaknesses. I think A or B, whichever you decide, is more convincing. But if you want to reach a complex judgment, you might say, well, I think interpretation A is more convincing in this area, but interpretation B is more convincing in this aspect. So that could be a totally valid answer, and it's a more complex answer than just saying one is more convincing than the other, because you're going into more detail, you're analyzing more carefully the details of what's being said. So remember, you can pause this video at any time and practice answering these questions. Okay, here's another example of a question 1. How do they differ? This is, how do interpretations A and B differ in their views on the impact of war on the German people? So take your time here. If you want to pause it again, take 5 minutes to see if you can answer this question. Once again, take into account all of this advice that's been given. And here's a question 2, another question 2. Why do they differ? Okay, same interpretations. And once again, if you want to take this advice into account while you pause and write an answer in 5 minutes. And question 3, which is more convincing? 8 marks, 10 minutes, 2 different interpretations. Which interpretation do you find more convincing? And once again, you can practice this structure in time conditions if you pause the video now. Okay, question 4 is probably the easiest question that you're going to get over both papers. It's just 4 marks. It's just a describe question, so it's really pretty much lower order thinking. It's just recalling and explaining. 4 marks, we know, is 5 minutes. 2 peel paragraphs, because there's 2 problems that you're being asked to describe. This question is testing your knowledge and your understanding. Okay, remember, check this advice here. You need to identify 2 aspects and briefly explain them. 1 problem and explanation per paragraph. And here are some examples of describe questions. Once again, you can pause this if you want to and have a go answering them in 5 minutes for a 4-mark question. Here are some more examples, same kind of question. Describe 2 problems faced by Stresemann. There's lots of examples here to practice. It's a good idea that you practice one that you feel less confident about. Maybe you want to take some time to revise the topic first and then come back and time yourself to answer it. 5 minutes for 4 marks. And finally, here are a few more describe questions. So lots of practice questions you can do here. And then question 5 of the Germany section, Germany 1890 to 1945. In what ways? This is a 10-mark question because it's 8 mark, 10 minutes question to answer because it's 8 marks. So aim to identify and explain 3 aspects. So 3 peel paragraphs to structure your answer. In what ways were problems affecting Germany before World War I? So you want to look at 3 problems and clearly explain and provide evidence of how those problems were affecting Germany before World War I. Remember, keep coming back to the question as you're answering it. Stop after a couple of sentences, reread the question, check that you are answering it. Here's another example. In what ways did the Kaiser try to make Germany more powerful in the years before World War I? Okay, so 3 examples, 3 peel paragraphs. You could provide 2 detailed peel paragraphs and that would be enough for 8 marks. Remember, the key thing here is the level of explanation that you're providing. Is it basic? 1 to 2 marks out of 8. Is it simple? 3 to 4 marks out of 8. Are you providing a developed explanation, which is 5 to 6 marks out of 8? Or are you providing a complex explanation, which is 7 or 8 out of 8? And once again, remember, use the question terminology. So in this case, question 3, in what ways were the lives of the people in Germany affected by the First World War? So for your first peel paragraph, come back to the question, use the question terminology. The lives of the people in Germany were affected by the First World War in that. Give 1 example, 1 point, and then bring in evidence and explain it. Finally, link back to the question before you provide your second peel paragraph, saying another way that the lives of the people in Germany were affected by the First World War was. Always use the question terminology for your point, and that way you are focused, you're answering the question, you're going to get marks for that. So take a moment to pause, look at some of the other in what way questions. Here is another example of in what way questions. Lots of examples there. Once again, you can pause if you want to answer some of these in 10 minutes, timing yourself. And finally, a few more. So we've got masses of questions here, lots of banks of questions that can really help you to see the kinds of questions that are going to come up. And also use this as a checklist to think about if you could answer all of these questions. Is there a question that you just couldn't answer? Then you are identifying an area that you need to go back and revise over. And finally, question 6 is, we said, the most heavily weighted question at 12 marks, so you'd spend 15 minutes on it, and you need to provide a 3-part plan. And here we can see what it would be. So remember, the question is, which was the more important reason why X or Y? And let's look at an example. Which of the following was the more important reason for the collapse of the German economy by 1923, the harshness of the Treaty of Versailles, or hyperinflation by 1923? So you're always going to be given just 2 factors or reasons. That's all you need to look at. You do not need to bring in any other factors or reasons. Just focus on the 2 that you'll be given. In fact, if you bring in another one, you're not answering the question. So just focus on the 2 that you have been given. And here's the structure: 15 minutes, 3-part plan. Paragraph 1, why reason X was important. In this case, let's come back to the question: which of the following was the more important reason for the collapse of the German economy by 1923? The harshness of the Treaty of Versailles, or hyperinflation by 1923? So for our first PL paragraph, we're going to start with this first reason. So the harshness of the Treaty of Versailles was an important reason for the collapse of the German economy by 1923 because, make a brief point, provide evidence, explain it, link back to the question. So this shows that the harshness of the treaty was an important reason for the collapse. And then paragraph 2, look at the second reason. However, it could be said hyperinflation by 1923 was also an important reason for the collapse of the German economy by 1923. You don't have to make a judgment yet. You're just analyzing each of the reasons. So first reason given, second reason given, using PL, analyzing, explaining why it was important. In this case, an important reason why the Weimar Republic was in danger. Paragraph 3 is critical because you're going to pick up lots of marks in this paragraph by making a judgment. So make a judgment as to which was more important, and of course bring in your own knowledge. So overall, what could we say for this? The more important, remember it's not most, because most is for more than 2, 3 or more. So focus on that grammar. It's just the more important reason for the collapse of the German economy by 1923 was. Choose one of the 2 and explain why it was more important. Don't go over again explaining why it was important. Explain specifically in paragraph 3 in making a judgment. Explain why it was more important than the other one. Okay, there's lots of practice questions here for you to have a look at, to pause and to answer in 15 minutes. And here are some more examples. Which of the following groups was more affected by Nazi policies? Farmers and agricultural workers, or industrial workers and factory workers? Okay, there's really just 2 groups there. So farmers and agricultural workers are one, separated, look at the grammar, or industrial workers and factory workers as being a second group. Which of the following groups benefited more from Nazi economic policy? Industrial workers or the owners of big business? Now these questions are really going to test your knowledge and understanding and your ability to analyze in detail the 2 factors, reasons or groups you've been given, and especially it's testing your ability to make a judgment and to support that judgment with your own knowledge. So once again, remember that the criteria for the assessment objectives for AQA are basic explanation, simple explanation, developed explanation, and complex explanation. It's the detail of your analysis and your evaluation, that's going to help you move into developed and hopefully complex explanations. Okay, and then we can move on to the second part of paper 1. We've just looked at Germany 1890 to 1945 and the 6 questions, 6 types of questions that will come up. The second part is conflict and tension between East and West, 1945 to 1972.